The Bolivian government is studying the possibility of opening a legal case against the Secretary General of the Organization of American States, Luis Almagro, over his interference in the internal affairs of the country. Leaders of several European countries are pressing the European Union to set up a corrective mechanism to address what they say are inequalities in the distribution of vaccines within the 27-nation bloc. In Yemen, protesters stormed the Mashik presidential palace of the internationally recognized Yemeni government this Tuesday amid public anger over the dire economic situation in the country. From the headquarters of teleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, I'm Katrina Goss. We begin in Bolivia, where the government is studying the possibility of opening a legal case against the Secretary General of the Organization of American States, Luis Almagro, over his interference in the internal affairs of the country. Justice Minister Ivan Lima informed that the possibility of legal action against the OAS Secretary General stems from his report and claims regarding alleged fraud in the 2019 elections, which were used by far-right sectors as a pretext for the coup against the Evo Morales government. Also in Bolivia, social movements have declared a state of emergency and permanent mobilization to demand sanctions against those responsible for the Sencata and Sacaba massacres, which occurred following the 2019 coup against the Evo Morales government. Several organizations have also denounced right-wing attempts at destabilization as the country prepares for the second round of the presidential elections and demanded that the democratic process be respected. At least 19 protesters were killed by military and police forces in Sencata and Sacaba in November 2019 as they took to the streets to reject the coup.
Because of the vote of each one of our brothers and sisters in the countryside and in the city. We congratulate all the elected authorities, and the second aspect would be, brothers and sisters, to call on you to be alert. We are like soldiers, sister, in the face of whatever the right wing attempts to do. We as the Bartolina Sisa organization are firmer than ever. Why? To make sure our vote is respected, to make sure our rights are respected. As citizens that we are, Bolivians, that is the brothers and sisters. Those people also tell them to join the second round.
This Tuesday, strike action by Peru's National Union of Transporters and Drivers continues against the increase in fuel, gas and toll prices. Several roads in the country have been blocked as part of the nationwide strike. Transporters point out that dialogue efforts with the government have failed and also stress that the 55% increase in the cost of fuels could not be passed on to passengers. They've called for action from Congress while not ruling out possible fuel and gas shortages in the domestic market. Members of Colombia's Congress are set to present a fixed basic income bill seeking to benefit more than 7 million households. The initiative seeks to grant families of 5 members or more with a universal basic income of around 470,000 pesos. Congress member Angela Maria Robledo explained that if approved, the bill will benefit women heads of households in order to contribute to their economic autonomy. In this sense, the executive branch of the National Teachers Union held a rally in the capital to express its support for the proposal. The Guatemalan Congress plans to begin postponed sessions to select magistrates for the Supreme Court of Justice and Courts of Appeals. The replacement of members of both courts should have taken place in October 2019, but a series of irregularities in the postulation commissions led social organisations to file appeals on the grounds of unconstitutionality. The selection of the officials will be conducted through an oral examination, as indicated by the Constitutional Court, which was also at the centre of attacks by the legislature. In this sense, social and rural movements have reiterated the rejection of the proposed magistrates, linking them to the misappropriation of national resources and to mining industries, as well as other corrupt acts. In Ecuador, the electoral campaign for the April 11th presidential runoff election began this Tuesday, March 16th. According to the National Electoral Council, candidates Andrés Araúz, representing the Progressive Union for Hope coalition, and Guillermo Lasso of the centre-right alliance between the Creating Opportunities and Social Christian parties will have until April 8th to make their government proposals to the electorate. Both candidates have scheduled caravans to start the new electoral campaign. According to their schedule, Arauz and Lasso will hold a presidential debate on March 21st in the city of Guayaquil. The first electoral round, held on February 7th, was won by Arauz with 32.72% of the vote, followed by Lasso with 19.74%. Police in the Brazilian state of São Paulo opened an investigation on Tuesday regarding a death threat against former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, who recently regained his right to run in the 2022 presidential elections after a judge overturned all the charges against him. In a video, businessman José Sabatini said he was willing to spill blood and to do his part to prevent Lula returning to office. Holding a gun and with a Brazilian flag around his waist, he also told the former president that you're going to have problems. São Paulo Governor João Doria, a potential candidate for the 2022 elections, condemned the threats against Lula da Silva and called for a judicial investigation. Cuban residents in the United States and other parts of the world are undertaking several projects to confront the media campaigns against Cuba and to demand an end to the US blockade. The initiative, named Bridges of Love, led by Cuban-American activist Carlos Lasso, has called to mobilize on March 28th as part of a global caravan against the US sanctions on Cuba. The campaign includes activists from the Association of Cuban Residents in Canada and the Associations of Cubans in Europe. Such projects by Cuba's friends across the world seek to shed light on the impacts of the criminal US blockade on the Cuban population. The previous initiative took place on February 28th in several cities in the United States and Canada. Leaders of several European countries are pressing the European Union to set up a corrective mechanism to address what they say are inequalities in the distribution of vaccines within the 27-nation bloc. Austrian Chancellor Sebastian Kurz hosted his Czech, Bulgarian and Slovenian counterparts in Vienna on Tuesday, while the Latvian and Croatian leaders joined them by video conference to reiterate demands first raised last week. The leaders claim that although the EU agreed on distribution of vaccines on a per capita basis, some countries have received considerably more than others.
We think this is a problem, because I believe that will lead to tensions within the European Union and wouldn't be understood by Europeans, because the people in Europe expected that all Europeans had equal access to vaccines at an equal rate. I believe it is important that we manage to implement a corrective mechanism together with the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and European Council President Charles Michel, so that Bulgaria doesn't only get 1/3 of the vaccines that Malta gets, for example. I think this wouldn't correspond to the spirit and the idea of Europe. That's why I hope we will be able to implement a corrective mechanism together.
The European Union's Health Commissioner has called on all member states to use all available doses of COVID-19 vaccines, stressing that some countries have still not used up to 50% of available doses.
We recognize the significant and regrettable challenges around production and deliveries, but we do, however, urge member states to use all the available doses, as we are currently seeing the proportions of available doses used ranged from 50 to 100% across member states.
Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon announced that Scotland is set to ease COVID-19 restrictions in early April. Cafes, pubs and restaurants can open until 8 p.m. indoors but will not serve alcohol, and outdoor drinking will be permitted until 10 p.m. Also, hairdressers will resume operations on April 5th, while gyms and non-essential shops will be allowed to open on April 26th. Travel restrictions in and out of Scotland will end from April 26th, but international travel will not be possible before May 17th. Scotland has been in lockdown since December 26th.
So reaching that milestone, and also taking account of the fact that it takes a couple of weeks for beyond that point. However, our hope and ambition is that from the early part of June, all of Scotland will move to level 1, which will allow for a further easing of restrictions. And then by the end of June, we hope that all of Scotland will move to at least level 0. Now, level 1 and even more so level 0 will be a massive improvement on where we are right now.
Serbia's Prime Minister Ana Brnabić said on Tuesday that the country will continue to use AstraZeneca's coronavirus vaccine and that it considers the vaccine safe and effective. The Prime Minister was speaking after announcing a lockdown for the rest of the week that will see all bars, restaurants and non-essential shops and businesses close. The Prime Minister added that the measures will be reviewed on Monday. Serbia is witnessing a surge in coronavirus infections despite a mass vaccination effort with several vaccines, including China's Sinopharm, the Pfizer-BioNTech shot, Russia's Sputnik V and AstraZeneca. The country's vaccinated more than 1.2 million people with at least one dose. On Tuesday, United States pharmaceutical company Moderna started COVID-19 vaccine trials for children aged 6 months to 12 years old, with plans to enroll more than 6,000 participants. According to the company's CEO, Stefan Bancel, the trials will be conducted on healthy children in the US and Canada. The study will help assess the potential safety of the vaccine candidate in this younger population. US health authorities said that fewer children have been sick with COVID-19 compared to adults, but they can be infected and can spread the virus. The Pfizer, Moderna and Johnson & Johnson vaccines have all been authorised for emergency use, and the companies are set to deliver more than enough to cover the entire US adult population by mid-year. While the US is hoarding vaccines and refusing to cooperate even with the European Union, many countries are struggling to secure the minimum doses to vaccinate at least vulnerable groups and health workers. Residents of the Brazilian city of Rio de Janeiro expressed mixed views after the announcement on Monday by President Jair Bolsonaro that he was replacing the country's health minister in the fourth change to the post since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, and as the country's health system struggles to cope with surging cases.
I believe that if you put a health professional in a leading health position, that's an improvement compared to a military general holding a position that requires specific knowledge, which, in this case, he proved not to have. Nothing changes because the person in charge is still the number one, so any minister that he appoints will do exactly what he orders. He can keep changing them again and again. It makes no difference.
And as the rate of COVID-19 infections and deaths continues to rise in Brazil, anger is mounting after it was revealed that the US government pressured Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro not to purchase the Russian Sputnik V vaccine. Our correspondent Brian Meir has the details.
In Brazil, a diplomatic incident is brewing due to revelations first published in an article in Brazil Wire yesterday by the British journalist John McAvoy. The article reveals that, as published in a U.S. Health and Human Services report, last year the Department of Health and Human Services sent an envoy from its Office of Global Affairs to Brazil in order to dissuade far-right President Jair Bolsonaro from purchasing the Sputnik V vaccine against COVID-19. In the report published, the Department of Health and Human Services labels the Sputnik V vaccine, which has one of the highest efficacy rates in the world, as a malign product. The report also reveals that it sent an envoy to Panama to dissuade that nation from receiving Cuban doctors to help fight the pandemic. Now, this issue with vaccines is blowing up in Brazil because it took months of legal battle for a consortium of governors from the Northeast to purchase 37 million doses of Sputnik. It went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and now it looks like the Brazilian federal government was deliberately creating obstacles and sabotaging plans of these governors to bring a vaccine that would save thousands of lives to their people.
In Yemen, protesters stormed the Mashhad presidential palace of the internationally recognised Yemeni government amid public anger over the dire economic situation in the country. The demonstrations came in response to a lack of basic services, poor living conditions and a depreciation of the local currency. A government source said that Aden's police chief had arrived at the scene to talk to protesters and convince them to leave the area. According to local sources, a parallel demonstration also took over government facilities in the eastern city of Sayun in Hadramaut province to demand better living conditions and lower prices. Angry protesters blocked off several neighbourhoods in the Lebanese capital, Beirut, on Tuesday as the local currency hit a new record low. The crash in the local currency has thrown many people into poverty, with salaries losing their value by the week and businesses closing down due to the lack of customers. Fistfights have broken out in supermarkets as shoppers argue over subsidised products, while some areas have been hit by gasoline shortages, leading to long lines outside gas stations. Lebanon's pound hit a new record low on Tuesday, trading at 15,000 to the US dollar.
When a client comes here, even if he was a foreigner, they know how much the dollar is. And they know that $1,000 they brought with them can be used to buy lots of things throughout the country. Well, we are still getting the same, but prices are going up. You buy a pack of Cedar cigarettes and it's 6,000 pounds. A cup of coffee is 3,000 pounds. Today, when you wake up, you spend 15,000 to 20,000 pounds before even having breakfast. The situation is unbearable.
Algerian students demonstrated in the capital Algiers on Tuesday to reject the early legislative elections called last week. President Abdelmadjid Tebboune issued a decree setting June 12th for the vote last Thursday after dissolving parliament last month. He's pledged that the June elections will be free of corruption and will open the doors of parliament to young people. The move came as part of pledges made following 2019 anti-government protests by the Hirak movement, yet has failed to satisfy many protesters. In Afghanistan on Tuesday, gunmen opened fire at a minibus belonging to a university in northern Baghlan province, killing at least 2 people and wounding 6. The provincial governor said a student and the driver of the bus were killed in the attack on the outskirts of Puli Khumri, the provincial capital. The wounded were all university lecturers. The bus was carrying students and teachers from the Faculty of Agriculture and was travelling to the university. No group immediately claimed responsibility for the attack.
They were shooting suddenly. A student was sitting behind me. I saw blood was coming from his head. I felt pain in my shoulder. The car became uncontrolled. Driver got martyred.
The United Kingdom's Conservative government unveiled plans this Tuesday to lift the cap on the country's nuclear stockpile as part of a foreign policy overhaul. The document Global Britain in a Competitive Age, the Integrated Review of Security, Defence, Development and Foreign Policy, presented by Prime Minister Boris Johnson, argues that Russia poses the most acute direct threat to the UK in rhetoric only comparable to the Cold War era. Campaigners and experts have warned that Johnson's plan to increase the size of the UK's nuclear weapons stockpile amounts to a violation of international law. The move reverses a previous commitment to reduce the stockpile to 180 warheads, instead pledging to increase it to 260 by the end of the decade. All this in the midst of an acute economic crisis.
The overriding purpose of this review, the most comprehensive since the Cold War, is to make the United Kingdom stronger, safer and more prosperous, while standing up for our values.
On Tuesday, protesters rallied outside the French Senate as politicians debate a controversial new security bill. The bill intends to criminalise the display and distribution of images of police officers which are deemed harmful to the force. Opponents of the motion stress it will hamper the work of journalists, restrict the filming and publishing of images showing police brutality, and violates freedom of expression. Mass protests were seen in the country last November when the bill passed in the lower house. UN Security General Antonio Guterres called for greater efforts to combat violence against women at the opening of the 65th session of the Commission on the Status of Women.
What you need is not more training for women, but to train those in power on how to build inclusive institutions. We need to move beyond fixing women and instead fix our systems. We must also support women leaders in all their diversity and abilities, including young women, migrant women, indigenous women, women on disabilities, women of color, and LGBTIQ+.
We've come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. For teleSUR English, I'm Katrina Goss. Thank you for watching.